Welcome and congratulations to making it to the summary portion of the course. What I'd like to do is just kind of review the process for determining end behavior, as well as kind of highlight some tips and tricks and review some kind of common mistakes that I see with students when they're trying to determine the end behavior of a polynomial. So basically, when we're determining the end behavior of the polynomial, basically what we are going to be doing is putting our polynomial in descending order. Then we want to be able to identify what is the the leading coefficient, as well as the degree of the polynomial. Based on the leading coefficient, if it's positive or negative, and the degree, if it's odd or even, we can then determine our end behavior. We'll then go ahead and write our end behavior, and also sometimes write it in function notation, which I wrote in there as a common mistake. So let's kind of go through the tips and tricks. First of all, a lot of students, once they kind of get the hang of this, say, oh, this is not that bad, odd, even, plus, positive, negative. Then they start forgetting to put things in descending order. So the basic thing that I always like to do, whenever you see a polynomial, always make sure you write your polynomial in descending order. That can eliminate a lot of simple mistakes later on. The next thing is, when I thought of like the graph, or like a visual aid, actually, that's pretty much what I should say. Visual aid. And the way that I like to look at it, kind of like Punnett square here, is, just think of there's four possibilities of your end behavior, right? You could have our LCD, or our leading coefficient, could be positive, or it could be negative, where our degree, I'll put that down here, our degree could be even, or it could be odd. So when you have something that's odd but positive, it falls left, rises right. When you have something odd that's negative, it rises left, falls right. And I always like to, I look at these and just, I kind of memorize this graph. I go positive, negative, odd, even. And then if it's positive and even, it rises left, rises right. And if it's even negative, it falls left, falls right. So if you can kind of, for me, I'm a visual learner. And if you can kind of like just memorize that visual aid and positive negative, then it's very easy for you to kind of remember like the rules of everything. Because our common mistakes are, one, always getting these mixed up, odd, even. You'll say like, oh, they can easily identify, oh, it's odd and it's even. But then they'll say odd and even should look like this, right? So you get them mixed up. That's a very, very common mistake, is not knowing your leading coefficient test. The next thing is the notation, especially when we're talking about function notation. Now, this one is a little bit more difficult to identify, but when we're dealing with a function, rather than an x and a y, right, we're now dealing with an x and a f of x function. So basically, when we're dealing with end behavior, what we want to know is the end behavior on the f of x axis. So we're going to have our x values, when we're looking, when we have a graph, all of these each every point on this graph has an x value. So as our x values keep on going to the right, they're going to eventually approach infinity. So as those x values go towards infinity, then what does the f of x values do? What do the y coordinates hence go for? And you can see they start to rise. So they're going to go to infinity. So you could say this one is, as x approaches infinity, the f of x coordinates also approach infinity. And for this one, you could say, as my x coordinates, as they go to the left, so as they approach negative infinity, my f of x coordinates, the y kind of coordinates of them, approach negative infinity as well. So each one of these has their own kind of notation, which I go over in this course. But it's very important to make sure you kind of understand that, because it's not always as simple as, rises left, rises right, or rises left, falls left, rises right, falls right. Especially on a test, you're going to want to make sure you know that notation. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed. Now you can determine the end behavior of a polynomial. Thanks.